The sound of retching echoed through the thin walls of the boarding house, and Weston Kane froze halfway up the stairs with a bundle of firewood in his arms. 3 women rushed past him going down, their skirts billowing as they clutched handkerchiefs to their faces, and he heard one of them hiss the word that made everyone in 1883 New Mexico territory turn pale with fear: cholera. He should have kept walking. Any sensible man would have dropped the wood and mounted his horse without looking back, putting as many miles between himself and Raton as his mare could manage before sunset. But Weston had never been particularly sensible, and when he heard the landlady, Mrs. Patterson, declaring loudly that the sick woman in room 7 would have to fend for herself because she would not risk the lives of decent folk, something hot and angry flared in his chest. He climbed the rest of the stairs and knocked on the door of room 7. No answer came, only a weak moan that sounded more animal than human. Weston tried the handle and found it unlocked. The smell hit him first, sharp and sour, the unmistakable stench of illness. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun, and in the narrow bed against the wall lay a young woman, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. "Miss." Weston set down the firewood and approached carefully. She did not respond, lost in the grip of fever. Her face was flushed crimson, lips cracked and bleeding, and even from several feet away he could see the violent trembling that racked her body. A basin beside the bed was half full of vomit, and soiled linens lay in a heap on the floor. He had seen cholera before, 3 years back when it tore through a cattle camp in Texas, and took a dozen men in less than a week. The woman before him had all the signs: the severe dehydration, the fever, the violent purging that could kill within hours if left untreated. She was young, probably not yet 25, and she was dying alone because everyone else had run. Weston pulled off his hat and rolled up his sleeves. If he was going to do this fool thing, he might as well do it properly. He started by opening the window to let fresh air circulate, then went downstairs to the pump in the yard. Mrs. Patterson was in the kitchen with 2 other boarders, and all 3 fell silent when he appeared. "I need clean linens, a bucket of fresh water, and whatever broth or soup you have in the house," Weston said flatly. Mrs. Patterson's face went purple. "You cannot be serious, Mr. Kane. That woman has the cholera. She will be dead by morning, and if you insist on playing nursemaid, you will be right behind her. Then I will need those supplies all the more urgently." He kept his voice level, but his eyes were hard. "I am paying for my room through the end of the week, and I expect you to provide what I am asking for." The landlady sputtered, but one of the other boarders, an older man named Thomas, stood and nodded. "I will help you carry it up. My own daughter died of fever once, and no one should pass alone like that." Between them, they hauled up 2 buckets of clean water, a stack of linens, a pot of weak chicken broth, and a bottle of whiskey that Thomas pressed into Weston's hand with a meaningful look. "For sterilizing," the older man said, "and for courage." Back in room 7, Weston assessed his patient more carefully. She was petite, fine-boned, with delicate features that would have been pretty if not contorted by illness. Her dress was of good quality, though now ruined, and he noticed a small leather valise in the corner with the initials ZG embossed on the side. Whoever she was, she had not always been destitute. He started with the most pressing need: getting liquid into her. Cholera killed by draining the body of water faster than it could be replaced. Weston lifted her head carefully, supporting her against his arm, and brought a cup of clean water to her lips. "Miss, you need to drink," he said firmly. "Just a little. Come on now." Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Most of the water dribbled down her chin, but he thought perhaps a few drops made it into her mouth. He tried again, and this time her throat moved in a weak swallow. It was a start. For the next several hours, Weston worked steadily. He stripped the soiled linens from the bed and replaced them with clean ones, then carefully removed her ruined dress and chemise, keeping her modestly covered with a sheet as he worked. He had grown up with 3 sisters and knew how to be respectful. He bathed her with cool water to try to bring down the fever, then dressed her in a clean nightgown he found in her valise. Every 20 minutes or so, he coaxed more water between her lips, sometimes plain, sometimes mixed with a little salt and sugar the way a camp doctor had once taught him. The woman thrashed and moaned, lost in fever dreams, and twice more she vomited, bringing up nothing but bile. Each time, Weston cleaned her up patiently and started the cycle again. Night fell. Thomas knocked once to bring a fresh pot of broth and take away the soiled linens, but otherwise, Weston was alone with his patient. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat, continuing his vigil. Outside, he could hear the sounds of rattan settling in for the night. A dog barking, horses passing on the street, someone playing a fiddle in a saloon several blocks away. The woman's breathing was rapid and shallow, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird beneath his fingers when he checked her wrist. He had no idea if she would survive the night. The odds were not good. But he found himself talking to her anyway, keeping up a steady stream of words because the silence felt too much like death. "My name is Weston Kane," he told her. "I am a cowhand mostly, though I have tried my hand at other things over the years. I was passing through Rattan on my way to Colorado, looking for work on a ranch up near Pueblo. But I suppose those plans are on hold for a bit." He dipped a cloth in cool water and laid it across her forehead. "You picked a hell of a time to get sick, miss, though I suppose nobody picks these things." He told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about losing his parents to influenza when he was 16, and heading west with nothing but a horse and $20 in his pocket. He talked about the cattle drives, the long months on the trail, the way the stars looked when you were 100 miles from the nearest town. He told her about his sisters, all married now with families of their own, and how he got a letter from the youngest just last month with a photograph of her new baby son. Sometime past midnight, the woman's eyes opened. They were gray-green, glassy with fever, and they fixed on his face with an expression of such profound confusion that Weston almost smiled. "Where?" Her voice was barely a whisper, raw and cracked. "You are in Rattan at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house," Weston said gently. "You have been very sick. Do you remember anything?" She blinked slowly, trying to focus. "Sick," she repeated. Then her eyes widened with something like panic. "Everyone, they all." "They left," Weston said bluntly. "They were afraid of the cholera, but I am here and I am not going anywhere." "What is your name, Zara?" she whispered. "Zara Grayson." "Well, Miss Grayson, you need to drink some water. Can you do that for me?" She managed a few sips before exhaustion claimed her again and she slipped back into fevered sleep. But Weston felt a spark of hope. She had been conscious, however, briefly. She had spoken. That was more than many cholera patients managed. The night stretched on. Weston dozed occasionally in his chair, but mostly he stayed alert, monitoring Zara's breathing, encouraging her to drink whenever she was conscious enough to swallow. Toward dawn, she had another violent bout of vomiting that left her sobbing weakly, and Weston held a basin with one hand while supporting her with the other, murmuring reassurances. "I am sorry," she gasped when it was over. "I am so sorry." "You have nothing to apologize for," Weston told her firmly. "Sickness is not your fault." "You should not be here," Zara whispered. "You will catch it, you will die." "Maybe," Weston said, "but so far I feel fine and you need help, so let's not borrow trouble." When morning light filtered through the window, Weston looked at his patient and allowed himself to believe she might actually survive. Her fever seemed marginally lower, her breathing slightly less labored. She was still desperately ill, but the crisis point had perhaps passed. Thomas knocked and entered with breakfast, a plate of eggs and bacon for Weston and more broth for Zara. The older man studied them both critically. "She looks better," he pronounced. "Color is not so gray. You did well, son." "She is not out of danger yet," Weston cautioned. "No, but she has a fighting chance now. That is more than she had yesterday." Thomas paused at the door. "Mrs. Patterson is having fits downstairs, by the way. Says you are going to bring pestilence on the whole house. I told her she was being ridiculous, but you should know there is talk of asking you both to leave." Weston's jaw tightened. "Let her try. I paid through the week, and we are staying until Miss Grayson is well enough to travel." Over the next 2 days, Zara slowly, painfully began to improve. The violent vomiting subsided to occasional nausea. Her fever climbed and fell but never again reached the terrifying heights of that first night. She was able to take small amounts of broth, then weak tea with bread softened in it. Most importantly, she was conscious for longer periods, though she tired easily and slept more than she was awake. Weston barely left the room. He cat-napped in the chair, ate the meals Thomas brought up, and devoted himself entirely to his patient's care. He learned that Zara was 23 years old, that she had come west from Philadelphia 6 months ago after her father died, leaving her with nothing but debts. She had been traveling to California where she hoped to find work as a teacher, but her money had run out in Raton, and she had been trying to earn enough for a stage ticket when she fell ill. "I was working as a seamstress," she told him in a thin voice on the 3rd day. "Mrs. Patterson hired me to mend linens. Then I started feeling sick and—" She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. "They all left. The other girls I was working with, they just ran. Mrs. Patterson would not even open the door. I thought I was going to die alone in this room." "You did not," Weston said simply, "and you are getting better now." "Why did you stay?" Zara asked. Her gray-green eyes searched his face with an intensity that made something shift in his chest. "You do not know me. You owed me nothing." Weston was quiet for a moment, considering. "I suppose because no one deserves to die alone," he said finally, "and because I could help, so I should. Most men would not see it that way." "Then most men are fools." A ghost of a smile touched Zara's cracked lips. It was the first time Weston had seen her smile, and he found himself hoping it would not be the last. By the 4th day, Zara was able to sit up in bed for short periods. Her fever had broken completely, leaving her weak and shaky but clear-headed. Weston helped her to the chair by the window so he could change the bed linens, and she sat wrapped in a quilt, looking out at the street below. "I have never been so tired in my life," she said wonderingly. "It feels like my bones are made of water." "That is normal after a fever like you had," Weston assured her. "You will get your strength back, but it will take time. You need to eat and rest and not push yourself too hard." "How long have you been here, taking care of me?" "4 days now." Zara turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression that made Weston suddenly aware of how close they had become in those days, how intimate the acts of caring for someone could be. He had bathed her, held her while she was sick, dressed her in clean nightgowns. He had learned the rhythm of her breathing and sleep, and could gauge her condition from across the room with a single glance. They had not known each other a week, but he felt like he knew her in ways that went deeper than casual acquaintance. "I do not know how to thank you," Zara said softly. "You saved my life, Mr. Kane." "Weston," he corrected, "and you do not need to thank me. I am just glad you are recovering." "Weston," she repeated, and he liked the way his name sounded in her voice. "I will find a way to repay you." I do not have money now, but when I get to California—" "I do not want your money," Weston interrupted. "Truly, Miss Grayson, you owe me nothing." She studied him for a long moment, and Weston found he could not quite meet her eyes. There was something happening here, something he had not anticipated when he first knocked on the door of room 7. He had expected to nurse a stranger through illness and then part ways, but now the thought of leaving Raton and never seeing Zara Grayson again sat uneasily in his chest. "Call me Zara," she said finally. "I think we are past formalities, do you not agree?" Weston smiled. "I suppose we are." That evening, Mrs. Patterson finally made good on her threat and appeared at the door with her arms crossed and her expression pinched. "Mr. Kane, you cannot continue to stay here," she announced. "It is not proper you spending all your time in this young woman's room. People are talking." "People can talk all they like," Weston said evenly. "Miss Grayson is still recovering and cannot be moved." "Then you must at least return to your own room. I will not have immorality under my roof." Zara spoke up from the bed, her voice weak but determined. "Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Kane has been nothing but a gentleman. He saved my life when you and everyone else abandoned me. If there is any impropriety here, it is in how I was treated by people who should have shown Christian charity." The landlady's face flushed. "I have responsibilities to my other boarders, and I had paid for my room in advance," Zara shot back. "Yet you left me to die." "Now see here." "No, you see here." Weston stood, and his 6-foot frame and stern expression made Mrs. Patterson take a step back. "Miss Grayson is right. You failed in your duty to a paying guest. I did what any decent person would do. And if you spread gossip about Miss Grayson's character, I will make sure everyone in Raton knows exactly how you behaved during her illness. Do you understand me?" Mrs. Patterson sputtered, but she backed down. After she left, Zara let out a shaky laugh. "I have never spoken to anyone like that before," she said. "I feel quite scandalous." "You were magnificent," Weston told her, and meant it. Over the following days, Zara's recovery continued steadily. She was able to take solid food again, first soft bread and boiled eggs, then heartier fare. Her color returned, the healthy pink replacing the waxy pallor of illness. She could walk around the room without assistance, though she still tired easily. And as her health improved, Weston found himself spending less time as a nursemaid and more time simply as a companion. They talked for hours. Zara told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her mother who had died when she was young and her father who had been a scholar and a dreamer, brilliant but impractical with money. She spoke of the books she loved, the poetry she had memorized as a girl, her dreams of teaching and making a difference in children's lives. Weston, in turn, shared more about his own past, his years drifting from job to job, the loneliness of the cowboy's life, the way he sometimes felt like he was searching for something he could not name. He made her laugh with stories of cattle drives gone wrong and horses with ridiculous personalities, and he loved the way her whole face lit up when she smiled. On the 8th day, Weston woke in his chair to find Zara already awake, sitting by the window fully dressed in a clean gray dress she had mended herself. Her hair was braided neatly down her back, and she looked almost like a different person from the half-dead woman he had first found in this room. "Good morning," she said, and there was something in her tone that made his heart sink. "I have been thinking about what comes next." Weston sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I am much better now, well enough to travel, and you have your own life to get back to. You were headed to Colorado for work, and I have delayed you more than a week already." "You have not delayed me," Weston protested. "I stayed because I wanted to. I know, and I am more grateful than I can say." Zara's hands twisted in her lap. "But I cannot continue to impose on your kindness." I need to figure out how to get to California and you need to go north. We both have to move forward. The thought of leaving Zara here, of riding away and never seeing her again, made Weston's chest tight. He had known this moment would come, but he had not expected it to hurt quite so much. "What about money?" he asked. "You said you were out of funds." "I will find work here in Raton for a few weeks until I can earn stage fare. I am stronger now, I can sew or clean or whatever needs doing." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "You do not need to worry about me, Weston. I will manage." Weston was quiet for a long moment, his mind racing. He thought about riding north alone, going back to the life he had lived before, drifting from ranch to ranch with no roots and no one waiting for him. He thought about Zara staying in this town where people had abandoned her in her hour of need, scraping by until she could move on to California, and a future that held no certainty. And he realized, with sudden clarity, that he did not want any of that. What he wanted was sitting right in front of him. "Come with me," he said abruptly. Zara blinked. "What? Come with me to Colorado? There are towns up there, schools that need teachers. You could find work and I could find ranch work and—" He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. This was madness. They had known each other barely over a week, but the words kept coming anyway. "I do not want to say goodbye to you, Zara. These past days, getting to know you, I have felt more alive than I have in years. And I think maybe you feel something too." Color rose in Zara's cheeks. "Weston, that is very generous, but it is not generosity, it is entirely selfish." He stood and crossed to her, dropping to one knee beside her chair so he could look her in the eyes. "I know this is fast. I know we have not known each other long, but I also know that what I feel for you is real. You are brave and strong and smart, and when you smile at me, I feel like I could take on the world. I am not saying we need to rush into anything. I am just saying, let's not part ways when we could see where this goes." Zara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You really mean that?" "Every word." "I do feel something," she whispered. "I tried to tell myself it was just gratitude, that I was confused because you took care of me. But it is more than that, is it not? When I look at you, I feel safe and happy and like maybe, finally, I found someone who sees me for who I really am." "Then come with me," Weston said again. "We will figure out the rest as we go." Zara let out a shaky laugh and wiped at her eyes. "This is crazy. People will think we are insane." "Let them think what they want." She looked at him for a long moment, and Weston held his breath. Then, slowly, Zara reached out and took his hand. "All right," she said. "Yes, I will come with you." The relief and joy that flooded through Weston was so intense it was almost painful. He squeezed her hand, grinning like a fool, and Zara smiled back, her whole face radiant. They left Raton 2 days later on a cool morning in late September. Weston had sold his horse and used the money plus his savings to buy a sturdy wagon and a pair of mules, figuring Zara was not yet strong enough for long days in the saddle. They loaded her few possessions and his bedroll into the wagon, along with supplies for the journey, and set out north toward Colorado. The first few days were slow going. Zara tired easily and needed frequent rests, and Weston was in no hurry. They traveled through the high desert of northern New Mexico, the landscape all red rock and scrub pine, with the mountains rising blue and distant on the horizon. At night, they made camp under the stars, and Weston taught Zara how to build a proper fire and cook over open flame. They talked constantly, learning each other's histories and habits and dreams. Zara had a quick wit and a love of wordplay that kept Weston laughing, and she listened with genuine interest to his stories about the ranching life. They shared a bedroll for warmth, but Weston was scrupulously respectful, always asking permission before touching her, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. One night, About a week into their journey, they camped beside a stream swollen with snowmelt from the mountains. Zara was sitting on a log near the fire, combing out her long hair, and the firelight turned it to deep mahogany. Weston watched her, struck by how natural this felt, how right. Like they had been doing this for years rather than days. "What are you thinking about?" Zara asked, catching him staring. "How lucky I am," Weston said honestly. "How different my life would be if I had just kept walking past your room that day." Zara set down her comb and came to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I think about that too, how close I came to dying and how you saved me. Not just my life, but everything after. You gave me hope when I had none." "You saved me too," Weston said quietly. "I just did not know I needed saving until I met you." Zara turned to look at him, her gray-green eyes reflecting the firelight. "Weston Kane, I think I'm falling in love with you." His heart hammered in his chest. "I know I am falling in love with you. I think I started that first night when you were so sick, and I was so afraid I would lose you before I even got to know you." "Then I suppose we are both in trouble," Zara said, but she was smiling. Weston cupped her face gently in his hands. "May I kiss you?" "I thought you would never ask." He kissed her softly, tentatively, and she leaned into him with a small sigh that made warmth bloom in his chest. She tasted like the coffee they had shared after dinner, sweet and bitter all at once, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "Well," Zara said shakily, "that was worth waiting for." Weston laughed and pulled her close, and they sat together by the fire until the flames burned down to embers, neither of them wanting the moment to end. They crossed into Colorado in mid-October, the aspen trees turning gold on the mountainsides and the air sharp with the promise of winter. Weston steered them toward Pueblo, the town he had been aiming for when he first left Texas months ago. It was a growing city at the junction of the Arkansas River and Fountain Creek, a hub for the railroad and the ranching industry, and Weston figured it would have opportunities for both of them. They arrived on a bright afternoon and took a room at a respectable hotel, Weston insisting on separate beds to preserve Zara's reputation. The hotel keeper, a motherly woman named Mrs. Chen, looked at them with knowing eyes but asked no prying questions. Over the next few days, they explored the town and began looking for work. Zara found a position first, hired as a teacher at a small schoolhouse on the edge of town that served children from the local ranches. The pay was modest but steady, and she would have a small cabin on the school grounds for her living quarters. Weston found work at a large ranch 10 miles outside Pueblo, managing horses and helping with the cattle. The foreman was impressed with his experience and offered him a place in the bunkhouse and fair wages. Everything was falling into place, except for one thing. They would be living miles apart, seeing each other only on Sundays when Weston had a day off. The thought of being separated, after spending every day together for nearly a month, was almost unbearable. "We could get married," Weston said one evening as they sat in the hotel dining room. He said it casually, like he was suggesting they get dessert, but his hands were shaking slightly as he cut into his steak. Zara set down her fork very carefully. "What? Married?" Weston repeated, forcing himself to meet her eyes. "If we were married, you could live with me. Or I could find work closer to the school. We could be together." "Weston, we have known each other 6 weeks. I know, and if you think it is too soon, I understand. But I also know how I feel about you, and that is not going to change whether we marry now or a year from now." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I love you, Zara. I want to build a life with you. If you need more time, I will wait as long as you want. But if you are ready, then so am I." Zara's eyes were bright with tears again, but she was smiling. "You are absolutely serious, completely." You want to marry me, Zara Grayson, seamstress and failed teacher with no money and no family. I want to marry Zara Grayson, the bravest, smartest, most beautiful woman I have ever met. The woman who makes me laugh and makes me want to be better. The woman I want to wake up next to every morning for the rest of my life. A tear slipped down Zara's cheek. When you put it like that, how can I say no? Is that a yes? Yes, you ridiculous man. Yes, I will marry you. Weston came around the table and pulled her into his arms, kissing her soundly while the other diners pretended not to stare. Mrs. Chen, watching from behind the front desk, smiled and made a note to prepare the honeymoon suite. They were married 3 days later by a circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Pueblo. The ceremony was simple, held in the hotel parlor with Mrs. Chen and a few other boarders as witnesses. Zara wore a dress of dark blue wool that she had sewn herself, and Weston wore his best shirt and the new vest he had bought for the occasion. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Weston kissed his bride with so much joy and relief that everyone in the room applauded. That night, in the privacy of their room, they consummated their marriage with a tenderness and passion that left them both breathless. Zara, who had never been with a man before, was nervous at first, but Weston was patient and gentle, taking his time to learn what made her sigh with pleasure. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Zara's head on Weston's chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. I cannot believe this is real, Zara murmured. A month ago I was dying alone, convinced my life was over. And now I am married to the most wonderful man I have ever met. Believe it, Weston said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, because I am not going anywhere. You are stuck with me now, Mrs. Kane. Mrs. Kane, Zara repeated, testing out the sound. I like that very much. They stayed in Pueblo through the winter, settling into their new life together. Weston found a small house for rent closer to the school, a 2-room cabin with a stone fireplace and a view of the mountains. It was not much, but it was theirs. Zara taught her students reading and arithmetic, and loved every exhausting minute of it. Weston worked long hours at the ranch, but always came home to a warm meal and the woman he loved. They had their struggles, as all new marriages do. Money was tight, and there were times when they had to choose between buying Zara new shoes or paying for lamp oil. They argued occasionally, learning each other's tempers and boundaries. Weston tended to be stubborn and prideful, reluctant to ask for help even when they needed it. Zara could be overly independent, trying to handle everything herself and wearing herself down in the process. But they also learned to compromise, to communicate, to support each other through the hard times. When Zara came home in tears because one of her students had been pulled from school to work on his family's farm, Weston held her and listened and did not try to fix it. When Weston injured his hand in a corral accident and could not work for 2 weeks, Zara took on extra sewing jobs and never once complained about the burden. By the time spring arrived, they had found their rhythm. They were a team, partners in every sense of the word, and they were happy. One warm evening in May, nearly a year after they first met, Weston came home to find Zara sitting on the porch steps, her hands folded in her lap and an odd expression on her face. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately, dropping down beside her. "Nothing is wrong," Zara said. "In fact, something is very right. I am pregnant, Weston." He stared at her, the words taking a moment to penetrate. Then joy exploded through him, so intense he could barely breathe. "Pregnant? You are certain?" "As certain as I can be. I saw the doctor in town today. He thinks the baby will come in late November or early December." Weston let out a whoop of pure happiness and swept Zara into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and told him to be careful. He set her down gently, then immediately knelt and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said solemnly. "I am your father and I already love you more than anything." Zara ran her fingers through his hair, her expression soft. "You are going to be such a good father. I am going to try my damnedest." The pregnancy was not easy. Zara suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months and was exhausted all the time. She had to stop teaching in October when she became too ungainly to stand for long periods, and Weston worried constantly about her health, remembering how close she had come to death once before. But Zara was strong, stronger than even she had realized. She prepared for the baby with determination, sewing tiny clothes and setting up a cradle in the corner of their bedroom. Weston built shelves and a changing table, and together they painted the walls a cheerful yellow. On a cold December night in 1884, Zara went into labor. Weston fetched the midwife, a capable woman named Martha who had delivered half the babies in Pueblo County, and then spent the next 12 hours pacing the tiny cabin while Zara labored in the bedroom. He had faced down stampedes and storms and angry bulls without flinching, but listening to his wife in pain nearly unmanned him. Finally, just before dawn, he heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn. Martha appeared in the doorway, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Mr. Kane. And your wife is doing just fine." Weston stumbled into the bedroom to find Zara propped up against the pillows, exhausted but glowing, with a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up at him with so much love it made his chest ache. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Weston approached slowly, almost reverently. The baby was impossibly small, with a shock of dark hair and a scrunched-up red face. His eyes were closed and his tiny fists waved in the air. Weston reached out and gently touched one miniature hand, and the baby's fingers curled around his thumb with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Weston breathed. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking William," Zara said. "William Thomas, after my father and the man who helped us back in Raton. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect, just like him, just like you." Weston bent and kissed Zara gently. "Thank you for him, for everything. You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible." "We gave each other everything," Zara corrected. "That is how this works." They spent the next few years building their life together, watching their son grow from a tiny infant into a rambunctious toddler. Weston continued working at the ranch, and eventually saved enough to buy a small piece of land where he could raise his own horses. Zara returned to teaching when William was 2, hiring a neighbor girl to watch him during school hours. Money was still tight, but they were rich in all the ways that mattered. They had a warm home, good friends, and most importantly, they had each other. Every night, after William was asleep, they would sit together on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, Zara leaning against Weston's shoulder while he held her close. "You ever regret it?" Zara asked one evening. "Staying with me that day in Raton. Your life would have been so much simpler if you had just walked away." "Simpler, maybe," Weston agreed, "but also emptier, lonelier, less meaningful in every possible way." He kissed the top of her head. "I thank God every day that I did not walk away, that I found you and that you found me." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zara Kane." "And you are mine," Zara said. She tilted her head up to kiss him, slow and sweet. "I love you, Weston, today, tomorrow, and every day after that. I love you too. Always." In the spring of 1888, Zara discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in October she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Rose. William, now nearly 4, was fascinated by his little sister and insisted on helping with everything from diaper changes to bottle feedings. Weston's horse breeding business was finally starting to turn a profit, and he was able to hire help so he did not have to work such long hours. They added a second bedroom to the cabin and a proper barn for the horses. Zara continued teaching, though she cut back to part-time so she could spend more time with the children. Life was not perfect. They lost a foal to colic one winter and nearly lost their savings. Zara's father-in-law, who Weston had been estranged from for years, died without ever reconciling with his son. William broke his arm falling from a tree and gave them both a terrible fright, but through it all, they had each other. When times were hard, they leaned on one another. When times were good, they celebrated together. Their love, which had begun in a sickroom in Raton, New Mexico, only grew deeper and stronger with each passing year. On a warm summer evening in 1895, Weston and Zara sat on their porch watching William, now 11, teach Rose, 7, how to ride the gentle mare Weston had trained specifically for the children. Their laughter carried across the yard, bright and joyful. "You remember that first night?" Zara asked suddenly. "When I was so sick I did not even know where I was and you stayed anyway." "Of course I remember. It was the night that changed my entire life." "I was so afraid," Zara admitted, "not just of dying but of dying alone, of having lived a life that meant nothing to anyone. And then you walked in and gave me hope." Weston pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "You gave me hope too. You gave me a reason to stop drifting and start building something real. A home, a family, a future. I was lost before I met you, Zara. You showed me the way home." "We found our way together," Zara corrected, echoing words she had spoken years ago. She looked up at him, her gray-green eyes still as beautiful as the day he first saw them. "And I would do it all again, every hardship and struggle, just to end up right here with you." "So would I," Weston said, and kissed her as the sun set gold and crimson over the Colorado mountains, their children's laughter floating on the breeze. They lived together for many more years, growing old side by side. William went on to become a veterinarian, and Rose married a lawyer and had 4 children of her own. Weston and Zara became grandparents, then great-grandparents, and their small cabin was always full of family on holidays and birthdays. Weston never forgot that day in Raton when he knocked on the door of room 7 and found a dying woman who would become his entire world. He never forgot the fear and the hope, the long nights of vigil, the moment when Zara opened her eyes and he knew she would survive. He never forgot how it felt to fall in love while fighting death, how every moment together felt precious because they had both come so close to losing everything before they even began. And Zara never forgot the cowboy who stayed when everyone else ran, who sat beside her bed through the darkest hours and refused to let her face death alone, who saw her not as a burden or a risk, but as someone worth saving, worth knowing, worth loving. She never forgot how he changed her life, how he taught her that love could be kind and steady and true. They had built something extraordinary together, a love story forged in suffering and strengthened by time. And when Weston Kane died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with his wife of 53 years holding his hand, his last words were simple and true. "Thank you for letting me love you." Zara lived 3 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling and retelling the story of how she met their grandfather, how she was sick and abandoned and certain she would die, and how a stranger became her savior, her companion, her husband, her great love. How they built a life together from nothing but hope and determination, and a love that refused to quit. That a single choice to stay instead of run can echo through decades, creating ripples of love and family and belonging that never truly end. The fever had broken all those years ago in that sickroom in Raton, But the love that began there burned bright and true until the very end, and beyond.